Okay, before we get started, we just wanted to introduce Angela Garofolo. Angela is an important member in our SEPTO community. We just wanted to say a couple of words and then we will begin with our presentation.
I can't thank you enough for the opportunity. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. I'm Angela Garofalo. I am currently member at large for the Katona-Lewisboro SEPTO, Special Education Parent-Teacher Organization. I was president for the past 2 years, and it was quite a privilege. And I'm really excited to still be on as member at large. And I am also the middle school representative for SEPTO. So I more so just wanted to introduce myself. There are a couple of dates that I did want to share. We have our next parent and caregiver gathering at the Horse and Hound on February 28th at 7 o'clock. As always, SEPTO takes care of the appetizers, but any drinks and dinners would be the responsibility of the individuals. And this is really just a great time to come and, meet new parents, caregivers in the district. Please know you don't have to have a child who has an IEP or necessarily in the 504. SEPTO is here for everyone. We have families who have kids with allergies, who might receive PT services, OT services at building level. So please just know you are all welcome to join. And once again, that's February 28th at 7 o'clock at the Horse and Hound. We also have a wonderful program of Buddies United that several years ago, a couple of high school students who are now graduating approached us and created like a buddies program for younger kids, whether it's elementary, middle, or even high school kids who are looking for a buddy. So our next Buddies United will be on March the 18th at 2 o'clock. As of now, we have the Cyrus Russell House reserved, but if we continue to get as lucky as we are this winter, we might end up having it at the Lewisboro Elementary School playground. So, and finally, we are having our big end of year event on June 22nd from 2 to 5 at the brand new Lewisboro Town Park. We'll have bouncing castles, the bubble bus is coming, food, snacks. It's one of our major fundraisers and has been, such a success last June, as well as our welcome back this past September. So you'll be receiving more information about that. If you would like to be part of our newsletter, you can email me your address at info@klsepto.org. And once again, thank you so much for this opportunity just to share some information and allowing me to introduce myself. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Angela. And Garofalo.
Perfect.
All right, I got it right finally. All right.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Just thank you very much. And we are going to move on with our presentation this time. Thank you to Dr. Madison Olsen, who is on the screen. If you just want to wave Madison, you'll hear from her. Dr. Sarah Freed, both our school psychologists here in the middle school, and Katie Burns, our 6th grade guidance counselor. So the 3 ladies that you see on the screen really are talking about effective communication in the middle school. We've tried to break this down in a way that's like relevant and helpful, we hope, to those of you at home. We know that since the pandemic, things have shifted a little bit in terms of communication. And so we just kind of wanted to like reinforce what good communication looks like. You'll see that there is a Q&A button. This is a webinar. So if you have any questions during the presentation, you can just go right down to the bottom, post your question. If we feel like we need to interrupt in order to it's a relevant question at the time, we will. Otherwise, we may leave questions till the end, till we get through the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the group and thank you very much in advance.
Thank you so much. So I'm Katie Burns. I'm the sixth grade counselor. I'm joined today by Dr. Olsen and Dr. Freed, two of our school psychologists. And we just wanted to put together a presentation on effective communication for middle school students. This is a topic that comes up a lot. We get a lot of questions from students and parents about how to kind of encourage your child to be able to communicate well and independently. Because as we're coming up from fifth, to sixth grade, and then sixth, seventh, and eighth is kind of a transition time for students, and they're learning a lot of these skills. So this is a time to work on and work towards, being able to do some of these things independently and become more self-reliant when it comes to communicating with their teachers, communicating with people at school, and communicating with their friends. So on this slide here, we wanted to just briefly touch on why is your child's independent communication important. We've said here that nurturing your child's independence at an early age helps to build their ability to become self-reliant. So ultimately, the goal that we're working towards is to have our students and your children be able to do a lot of their communicating on their own. We have this quote here on the bottom just to kind of make the point that the more risks that you allow children to take, the better they learn to take care of themselves. So this is a risk-taking time, and risks, of course, in the sense of, nothing dangerous, but risks in terms of their communicating, doing some things that feel a little bit maybe uncomfortable for them, reaching out on their own. That those things make students nervous, especially in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. And this is a time of their life when we can start to help them learn those skills and work towards doing that more independently. So helping our children to do these things independently as parents can feel difficult. I have sixth graders myself as a parent. I have twins who are in sixth grade, and I have seen this at home too. We know that it's difficult as parents to have our children do these things independently. We don't want to see them struggle. We don't want to see them feel difficult emotions. We don't want to see them fail. They are going to fail and feel difficult emotions and struggle along the way. And it's really hard to watch that, as a parent. We want to put the Band-Aid on things. We want to make it easier for them. And sometimes it is easier to just say, you know what, I'll do the communicating for you. Let me send the email rather than having you do it. And there are times as parents where we do have to step in and take the reins of the communication along the way. Something kind of escalates, gets a little bit over their heads, and we do have to step in and do it for them. But then there are also times where we can give them the opportunity to try it themselves first. And we talked a little bit on this slide about short-term relief versus long-term benefits. In the short term, as parents, it's easy for us to do things for our children because it relieves that short-term distress. They're in distress about something. They need to email a teacher. They need to email or text or talk to a friend. They're feeling some stress, whatever that is, and we want to relieve that as quickly as possible. So us taking over and doing it for them typically can relieve that in the short term. However, this is more like a long game. And the long-term benefits of teaching them these skills early on is that we teach them to learn how to tolerate the distress that they're feeling, the difficult feelings that they're having, and then eventually be able to get through that on their own and do the communicating themselves, and have those skills then that they need in the long run. And eventually, the goal is that they can start to just be regularly doing these things, with ease. So we'll go to the next slide. And so part of the reason why we are talking about this is because at the middle school level, there are some new challenges. So, from elementary to middle is a big change. I know we have not only sixth grade, parents here with seventh and eighth grade too, but over the course of these 3 years, it really is a learning time for our students. So there are a lot of challenges that come with middle school. Sometimes they've forgotten something that they need, forgetting daily materials. Sometimes, a lot of the time, all the time, they have to manage differing expectations of several different teachers. That's a big change from fifth to sixth grade, especially. Uncertainty about when and how to prepare for assessments or long-term projects. So sometimes that overwhelm of having something huge due in a month, causes some stress over the timeline, questions about the project, things like that. Following up about work that's missed when we're absent, and then managing and maintaining relationships with peers is a big part of navigating middle school. So, and another part of the reason why we're talking about developing these skills is because we want to look ahead to where the students are headed. So right now they're in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, they're in middle school, but going into high school is another big transition time, and going from high school to post-high school, college, or whatever their plans are after high school, is another big transition time. So when they are using this middle school time to learn these communication skills, it's because they're headed to a place where there are going to be more expectations on them. So being able to make appointments and keep appointments with teachers and counselors, especially in the high school, this is big that they do this independently. Planning and coordinating things like community service hours, a schedule for a part-time job, sports schedules, etc. Completing applications for clubs, organizations, colleges, trade school scholarships, any other kind of post-high school plans. That all needs to be done independently eventually when the students get to high school. And then reaching out to outside organizations with questions. So for example, when they are juniors and seniors, calling their college admissions representatives for questions about their applications and things like that. That's all where we're headed. So we thought it was important to talk about this topic now, because working on these skills in middle school is a good way to start that process now so that they can eventually get to this point that they're headed to.
Okay. So in the upcoming slides, we are going to talk about tools for communicating with teachers, friends, and then just generally speaking at home. But prior to fostering any type of communication, really the first step is to problem solve. And sometimes, again, going back to what Katie had just shared, that sometimes we want to alleviate the distress and just solve the problem for our children without necessarily consulting them or having them think through the process and think through the steps, which is a really important skill to facilitate. And I often, if I'm meeting with students here, I often do that with them and have them a part of the problem solving process. So before deciding on what the need is or the method or the style of communication, which we'll get into, we want to be able to foster that problem solving and do it collaboratively with our students. So this is a very tangible way to problem solving. And if I've worked with any of your students, they may already know this. And so I think it would even be good bridging school to home for you at home to use this as well. So steps 1 through 5 here, spell out the word steps. So the first step is say the problem. So before we can solve anything, we have to be able to identify what is it that we need help with. Is it we are missing an assignment and we don't know where it is? We don't know where to look for the assignment. Is it that we're having a difficulty with a friend and we need to speak with them about it? Or the problem really is just the difficulty with a friend. So say what the problem is and identify it. Step 2 is think of solutions. So just jot down any possible solution. Oftentimes I will give very extreme solutions, which may be very obvious that they're not the appropriate solution. When I work with students, they usually get a kick out of that. So I'll give a very extreme example and then some more reasonable ones. And I'll kind of get the look of, wait, did you just say that? And I'll say, yes, because it's still a possibility. Does it mean that it's an appropriate one, or does it mean that it's one that we will actually use? Maybe not, but it definitely is still a possibility. So we jot down all the possible solutions. Think at a minimum. Step 3 is to evaluate each solution. So go through the pros and cons of the solutions that have been written down to see which one is really the most effective. So which one is going to give me really meet my needs. So maybe it's considering the long-term consequences of the solution and the short-term consequences, right? Like, are we going to pick a solution that is going to make us really upset in the short term? And make it almost that it's intolerable, and just because it gives a long-term outcome? We might not, right? We need to find one that has a balance by evaluating the pros and cons. Then step 4 is to pick one. So select one that we think might be the best one based on the evaluation of the pros and cons of the different solutions, and then see if it works is step 5. With this being said, if it doesn't work, right? So we see if it works. If it doesn't work, then we come back to looking at the other options for solutions. And if we don't have one there that might be feasible, then we try to think of new ones. And the hope is that while this is a very concrete system to problem solving, the hope is that eventually your child will be able to say, okay, this is the problem. I've thought of some solutions. What do I think is the best one? And then pick one, right? For it to become a little bit more natural. But initially, I think it's definitely important to go through these steps so that way they the process. So with that being said, the first area that we're going to talk about is communicating with teachers. I think all three of us can speak to that. Usually students don't know when to send an email or when to talk to a teacher or an adult in person, and then how to do that. How to have the conversation, what might be the appropriate time to have the conversation. So here, I think sending an email, at least in our experience, I think is very novel and new for middle school students. And I think just with the way that things have shifted, especially through COVID, communicating via some online system, whether it's email or Schoology, is usually it's more regular now. And I think this is the perfect time to help your child start to learn that. Some of the challenges that we hear, you may say to your student, hey, send an email, and they may say, I don't know how to, or, I don't know what to write, or it's going to take too long, it's going to be too hard. And so when I hear those three different types of statements, I think immediately about different ways or different challenges that are happening and how to address them with your student. So if your student were to say, I don't know how to, you might offer them a template, which we'll show to you not yet. You might offer them a template, and you may say, it's okay, I can give you an example that will make it easier. So that way they have almost a formula to fill it in and see what it really looks like. If they say, I don't know what to write, you may say feeling stuck can feel hard. Jot down your thoughts on the page and I'll come help you in 10 minutes. So encouraging them to at least start a draft, and then you can go back and edit with them. And then the third common challenge is it's going to take too long. Like I said, it's going to be too hard. So when I hear that, I think we need to lower the demand a little bit. So you might say to them, I know it can feel hard. I want you to sit with me and I will type while you talk. That may be one way of lowering the demand. You might also say, I'll write the first part, you write the last sentence and sign your name. Or you do the introduction, you do just the greeting, I'll write the email, you sign it. So that way they're at least involved in the process and are watching you do it. And you're reducing, the difficulty of the task for them in that moment. And, it may not actually be that the task is super difficult, but that the emotion that's coming up with having to send that email is also really getting in the way. And so we want to be able to help them to feel successful doing it. I think oftentimes too, when I sit with students to write an email, naturally, it very much looks like a text message. So helping them to formulate that, which we'll show you now on the next slide. So we've provided here an email template and example, hopefully with the hope that you can use this as a tool with your students. So simple greeting, an optional friendly opener or small talk, the reason, and then a solution if one can be offered. So we have here, dear Mr. J, I hope you're well. I was absent yesterday and noticed that I needed a packet to complete the homework assignment. So reason for emailing, I was wondering if I could come to you during home base, suggestion to get the packet, or whether you might be able to email it to me, and then closing. So this may be something that if your student is saying, I don't know how to, when you're giving them the template, this might be an example you could use with them. Then when to communicate in person. Or rather how to communicate in person. So again, some of the challenges that we hear, or that I hear when I talk with students or parents that I work with, is the students have difficulty finding a time to communicate with a teacher or communicate in person. So they'll say, I don't know when to talk to them, I don't have the time. If that's the case, you could say, let's look at your schedule to see when there could be the best time. Oftentimes students think, no, my schedule is jam-packed. How could I possibly do that? When really they could go during a non-academic time or home base, right? Home base, lunch, a United Arts period, a PE period. That's when we encourage students to take care of something if they have to, and we want to find the most ideal time, right? So if there are other times available, no, we don't want them missing their PE or UA if they can go during home base. So again, this comes back problem solving skills. So identifying the problem, it's whatever it is, I don't know when to talk to the teacher about my schoolwork, and finding the time and figuring out different solutions for that. Uncomfortable feelings or worry thoughts. So sometimes students will say, I'm worried they'll be upset with me, or my friends may hear me talking about it to my teacher. So simple response might be, it makes sense that you feel worried about this. Your teachers have told us that they want you to ask them questions and communicate with them more. So really, again, here we're validating or acknowledging their feeling in the moment. What you'll notice about a lot of the responses that we'll go through is first acknowledging the student's feeling and then moving on to what needs to be addressed. And then again, here we would help problem solve with them. When might be a better place or time to address this with your teacher? And then the third area is lack of skill. So I don't know what to say. So they may actually just have trouble communicating one-on-one or communicating with an adult. So figuring out where that difficulty lies and then helping them to build that, or even practices. So I know it can be hard to know what to say. Why don't you write out some ideas and then we can role play it? So you might even do a role play with your child at home, pretend that you're the teacher and the child is communicating whatever it is that they need to convey their need in that moment. Okay, so Dr. Freed is going to take us through communicating with friends.
Okay, so obviously, Jeff.
Can I just stop for 1 minute? So we have a question that just came up. So before we move on to that next piece, it says, good morning. We are encouraging our middle schooler to advocate for himself. His experience with emailing teachers so far has been very inconsistent. In some cases, no response, etc. Is it expected teachers email? Yes, it is. How should we best navigate this? And I think it could be a combination of some of the things that Madison has just said, like, I need to speak to you about something. If it's an in-person thing, identifying the problem, I think that those are all great pieces, but anything else beyond those regular communication tools, there is a lot of time in the day. I was in a classroom the other day, a 6th grade classroom, and a student said, to the teacher, can I talk to you in the hallway for a minute? So if there are those privacy questions that do come up, that might be a way to address that type of thing. Any other suggestions from the panel?
Just like logistically, I don't know if some teachers might check Schoology more, or since they're posting work in Schoology, your students can send a Schoology message, same template as we provided for the email, but that might be, some teachers might prefer that. I don't know logistically.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. So now we're going to get into communicating with friends, but we're going to keep it really brief because we know that friendships on their own could be a whole separate topic. And, communicating with friends itself could be its own presentation. So we just wanted to provide a couple of things about communicating with friends. First of all, we wanted to talk about when to communicate over text versus in person. So especially with social media, and the increase of technology use, we see a lot of students more reluctant to talk to their friends in person. Even just like hanging out in person, I feel like has decreased, but also solving problems. A lot of us tend to see it happen over text. And we would recommend, as you'll see, problem solving is best for in person. So we're not saying that your kids should never text or, never communicate with their friends on social media. Obviously, that's unrealistic. And texting is really nice. It is convenient for quick things that don't really need an expression of feelings that can't necessarily or are harder to be misconstrued. So text is best for like a quick question, about school, about something else, making plans as well. So do you want to go to the mall this weekend? Can you come over this weekend? Do you know what our homework is for math? So quick questions are making plans. Small talk obviously is fine. Like, what are you doing tonight? Obviously, it doesn't have to be just a question or making plans. It can also just be chatting, communicating, keeping in touch with your friends, right? In person, though, we feel like it's definitely best for more difficult, for lack of a better word, conversations for anywhere where text can be misconstrued, which we see all the time. And it happens to us as adults as well, where, you know, something comes out the wrong way over text. And then the next day, you know, I'll have someone say to me like, oh, did you mean to say this? And I said, oh, I didn't mean it to come off that way. No, like, you know, but our intention gets lost over text, obviously. So we want to save the communicating feelings, especially if there's like a problem or, you know, your child is not feeling great about a friendship or a relationship. We want to encourage them to communicate that in person, if at all possible. We do have a little script for it in our next slide, because we know that communicating our feelings can be really challenging for our students. And for some of us, frankly, it's difficult to tell someone how you feel and to know how to do it in a way that's non-confrontational and isn't going to cause, hopefully, more problems than it solves. We also want to leave problem solving for in person. I think especially with a group, but even just with one student, but especially with a group of kids, if a whole friend group is having difficulties or a whole friend group had this issue and then they're trying to solve it, a group text is probably not the best way to solve it. So, you know, again, things get lost in translation, someone doesn't speak up or someone misses a text that someone sent, especially in a group message. So we can all talk, or they can all talk about that rather in person, either at the lunch table, or they can go to, you know, if they see either Madison or I or Katie, you know, or their counselor can always go to them and the counselor can help facilitate that conversation if they need help. But we want to save that for in person. And then apologizing, similarly, you know, it comes across as much more genuine in person. And I think it means a lot more if you're able to apologize in person. And again, we are really equipping our students with these, you know, skills that they're going to need for the rest of their lives, right? Like, I had to apologize for something today, and I'm going to do it in person because then you get to see my reaction. I actually get to have a back and forth, and you can't necessarily just ignore me either. It helps the other person also learn to accept an apology, to learn how to talk about it, and to really take ownership and be vulnerable sometimes, that like we all make mistakes and we want to be able to have that conversation in person. So just a quick script for communicating feelings, because again, we know this can be difficult. And oftentimes we'll see students, you know, come about it, or I will see students come about it in a way that sounds blaming the other person when that's not necessarily how they intended it to sound. But then the other person becomes defensive and it can escalate. So we really want to help our students start with I statements instead of you statements, and suggest a solution for the problem if you can. That's not always possible, and that's okay, but then it could just say like, can we talk about it? Can we problem solve together? But again, we really want to start with the I feel. So if you see this script, I feel blank when blank, and I would like blank. That's pretty much all it comes down to. And then in our example, we kind of fill in these blanks. So I feel sad when there aren't enough seats at the lunch table and I'm left out. Maybe when that happens, me, you, Jill, and Joe can go sit at another table together. So offering a solution if you have one. And again, it's okay if you don't, but the main idea here is that we want to start with I feel statements rather than like, you leave me out at lunch when there aren't enough seats. The other person is instantly going to become defensive and say that they don't do that, right? Whereas if you start with I feel, the other person hopefully can't really deny that or isn't going to feel defensive and go into this fight mode. So that is our little, very quick communicating with friends section. Again, we know that that's a bigger topic and can be its own presentation. So then we just wanted to get into communicating at home, which are some tips for you as parents in communicating with your children. So we want to start with a little acronym that you might keep in mind for communicating with your children, but it's really just a skill in general for communicating with anyone that you want to, that you want to maintain a good relationship with. So the acronym is GIVE. You know, we're a little loose with the acronym here, and that there's be gentle and there are words in front of that. But if you remember GIVE, you should be able to remember it. So the G stands for gentle, so be gentle. So we just want to remember that we're trying to stay away from judgments if we can, watching our tone of voice, watching sarcasm. You know, some of our students can react well to that, some of them don't. Speaking with a soft and neutral tone of voice. Again, being aware of like body language as well, which also comes into this I, which is to act interested. So I think at home, especially like, you know, you guys are so busy doing a million things, working or answering emails, talking to your kids, doing the dishes, having dinner ready. It's really hard to find a time to just have a conversation. And we find that if you're able to really give your students your full attention just for like 5 minutes, it really shows them that that you are interested, and they're going to open up a lot more. So if you can try and, you know, give them your full attention, maintain eye contact, keep your body towards them, listen without interrupting, which gets into the V, which stands for validate. So Madison kind of brought this up earlier. In a lot of our if this is a problem, then try this. You're going to see that validating piece first. And validating is simply showing the other person that you understand their feelings or their perspective without judgment. An important point here also is that you don't necessarily have to agree with their feelings or agree with their actions in order to validate. So you don't have to agree to understand where they're coming from. Oftentimes, I think, you know, we want to solve our kids' problems, like we've all said. And so we jump into problem solving with them so quick, like, oh, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And we don't give them a time to just feel heard. And sometimes that's all they need. It's just to vent for a minute before we jump into problem solving and to really feel like we understand where they're coming from. So validate is a huge skill. It's so easy, and you can, like, when you utilize it, you visibly see people soften and like become more open to having a difficult conversation. So that's a really important one. And then the E in give is to use an easy manner. So you can joke around with your student, especially if they're, you know, more of a humorous person. You want to use non-threatening body language, smile, etc. And then we just wanted to talk about, we know that middle schoolers especially can be very elusive in talking about their day and sharing information of what happens in school. So, you know, we wanted to just give the suggestion of using really specific questioning when you're talking to your child about school. So rather than asking them like, how was your day? Or this really open-ended question where they can easily just say good or fine, and then that's it. And then they go to their room and that's all you hear from them for the rest of the night. You can try some more targeted, specific questions. So who'd you sit with at lunch today? What did Miss Dillon teach you in ELA today? What was the high point of your day? What was the low point of your day? Obviously, with some students, you know, they're still going to just give you one-word answers. And though the hope is that you'll get a little more specific answers so that you're able to ask some follow-up questions. And then we wanted to talk about like using labeled praise. In general, this is a parenting tip, but especially when you're communicating with your student, really thanking them and thanking them for what specifically you want to see increase in the future. So thank you for telling me who you sat with at lunch and why. It helps me understand like who your friends are, and I care about who your friends are. Or thanks for letting me know what you learned about in ELA. I'm actually really interested because I don't remember what I learned in middle school. You know, whatever the reason is, and really labeling what you're thanking them for in the hopes that you will see that behavior then increase, because we know that praise is often a reinforcer, which will increase the likelihood of that behavior in the future. So that is about the end of our presentation. We have a list of resources here. I assume we'll upload this presentation to the website, so you'll be able to have a copy of this, but just some books and articles for communication, communicating with your students. And then we just wanted to leave it open for any more questions.
Thank you very much. We've had a couple of questions that have come through. We read one earlier another one about will this be uploaded? So it will definitely come from the PTO. Maybe we send it out from the school as well, just to end with an invite to people to sign up for more PTO thing. But if there are any other questions from anybody paying attention, I'm in the room with some PTO people right now. So I don't know if there are any questions that are going to come live here that you just want me to repeat, or anything that comes to mind. I did see some people taking pictures of the slides as we went through. So again, thank you to Sarah, thank you to Madison, thank you to Katie. Thanks for the PTO for hosting this. I think what we've tried to do with this presentation, and again, thank you to everybody on here, is really talk about like concrete examples, ways to work with your children. Like this is an important time in their lives when they are like faced with these issues for the first time. So again, thank you, for the work that all of you did in putting this presentation together. I think it's a great way to help parents, help students, and hopefully end up in a better space for communication. Any questions in the room? Good. I'll repeat it.
Do students in middle school, or depending on the grade, do they get, like, I know from my experience, like, these are not aware of what they're supposed to do regarding teacher communication. Is that something that's like clarified in the room, like on a board or something, or regularly brought up, like, okay, and remember, email me blah 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 when blah blah blah. Just because I feel like I just was repeating myself.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have different students, so people absorb things differently. That's all. Like, is it part of the curriculum?
Okay.
In the sense of the teacher introducing it, so it's not like failing.
So the question basically is like, what are the expectations around student communication with teachers? So I would say personally, it's very dependent on the teacher, right? So some might say questions come up in the beginning of class. Some might say email me if you're having questions with homework. So I think a lot of different things. What we've tried to do in this presentation is say, if your child is struggling, saying like, I don't know what to say, that we wanted to provide some concrete examples of like ways that you can all work with your children in order to say like, here is the struggle that I'm having. Other answers from the panelists?
I would agree with that. And I think in most cases where I have been involved with communication with students and teachers, most teachers like to know if a child is struggling or having difficulty with something. So I think more so advocating for themselves, whether it is in person or over email, because a lot of times what happens is, if it's specifically, an example about homework, teacher will say like, I didn't know that you were struggling with that. If you had emailed me last night, I could have helped you. You could have done it. So of course, is a teacher available 24/7? No, right? And if they are available, they may answer. So I think, a lot of teachers, I think at this point are pushing for that self-advocacy and want students to reach out, and however that is.
Yeah, and I would agree with that too. I think all the team meetings that I go to as the counselor, when we have, parents in for conferences and things like that, this topic comes up a lot, and the teachers always say, please have your student or your child email me with questions, please have them reach out. And just to echo what Madison said, always the open communication is better than the non-communication. So, teachers really do appreciate a student to reach out and say, I'm struggling with the homework. I don't understand this part. I have to ask you about this tomorrow, something like that, rather than not do it, give up, and then like come in with it on not finished or like things like that, so just kind of always leaning towards the open communication with the teacher, I think is appreciated.
Yeah, I would say that most students or most teachers, so we have extra help once a week. So if your child is going to go to extra help and that's something that you're encouraging at home, coming in with those specific questions of what not just like, I don't get it, but I don't understand this piece, or this part of the piece. I'm struggling with this exact topic, I think is a good way. And again, I think that some of the examples we provided today hopefully will help with that, with identifying that problem and ways to communicate. No other virtual questions. Any other questions in the room? Good.
For extra help.
Yep.
You know, I feel like sometimes I'll send my son to extra help. He doesn't necessarily have a specific question. And then sometimes I'll be like, well, I can't go to extra help because I don't have a specific question. I mean, they should be able to go just to review whatever is going on, right? Like
they can, and I think, but that then is the specific question, right? So I used to teach math. And so when a student would show up, I'd say like, I'm here. Yeah. I'm like, okay, but what do you need help with? Because I can go in a bunch of different ways. So like, I think the question back to the child would be like, what's the thing you understand the least, right? And just organize it in some way. Okay. Yeah. But I think just like, again, you've covered 4 topics since the last time you went to extra help. What's the thing that you're struggling with the most or that you understand the least? And just prioritize that in some way, right? Like, that's a good skill to have for when we get to subjects that have cumulative tests. Like, we don't want to spend time studying stuff we already know. We want to spend time studying the stuff that we're a little more unsure of. Other answers on that for just around extra help and questions that come up for any of you in your roles?
I think I've heard this before also, you know, and I think I'm really just echoing what Jeff just said, but yeah, I mean, students can certainly go to extra help to review, you know, if they have tests coming up, they might go to extra help because they just say, I want to just kind of study the vocab, or I want to just study the topics or whatever it is, you know, and that's totally fine. And that might be a little bit more independent working at extra help. You know, the teacher there might say, okay, well, you know, you work on like, here's, you know, you do some review, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to come back and revisit with you. And they do bounce around, you know, and things like that at extra help. I think the most helpful is just when they know what their goal is. Like, what do you want to get out of extra help? Might be also a good way to think of it, you know, so not necessarily that you have to go to extra help with a specific question, but just having a general idea in your mind of what are you planning to get out of it today? Is it because you want to review because there's a quiz on Friday, or is it because you don't understand something? And if so, what do you not understand, you know, specifically, or at least in a general topic or something like that is always helpful. So.
Thank you. So again, thank you to our panelists. Really appreciate you putting the presentation together again with a lot of concrete examples today, and ways to help for us as educators and for parents to help their children communicate at this really important stage in their lives when they want our help less, but they still need our help a lot. So again, thank you so much. And that will be the end of our presentation. Cheryl, anything else you wanted to add just from PTO?
Hi. Just one other thing, we're still looking for some 7th grade parents to kind of take the lead on the 8th grade moving up ceremony. This is not something that 8th grade parents can do on the day of because we'll be busy. So if anybody is, you know, willing to help kind of coordinate the breakfast and the celebration after, please reach out to PTO, jjmspto@yahoo.com, and you will soon be receiving some emails with signups for the level events, for volunteering at the events, and also donating snacks for the event. So look out for those emails. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody.